Good afternoon. Make sure everybody can hear me okay. I am Teresa Furr, Director for the Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District, and we're excited to host this year's 16th annual virtual Keeping the Farm workshop this afternoon. Of course, in this full year of many challenges brought onto us by the COVID-19 pandemic, we're very excited to still to be able to bring to you these important updates and information from the experts on how to keep your farm and forest land in the family for generations to come. After each presentation today, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. We ask that you put your questions in the chat or comment box. If you're watching on the YouTube, there should be a box to put those in, and on Facebook as well if you're watching from Facebook Live. We will have staff monitoring those comments and questions, and we'll try to make sure to get those questions to the presenters in the time frame that we have today to do this, and hopefully get those questions answered. Just a reminder that all the presentations this afternoon are being recorded and will be placed on our Wake County Soil and Water website for anyone to watch at a later date. We will also be posting our contact information if you prefer to talk with someone in person, a live person, by email or phone, or have additional follow-up questions that you would like to get answered after presentations today. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to attend this virtual Keeping the Farm workshop. First up on the agenda this afternoon, we have welcome remarks from our Wake County Board of Commissioners. We have Chairman Matt Calabria and Vice Chair Vicki Adamson both presenting those remarks. So we'll let that go now for our first agenda item.
Hi, I'm Matt Calabria, Chair of the Wake County Board of Commissioners, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Keeping the Farm workshop. This is our 16th year holding the workshop, but like so many things in our world today, we're doing this one a little differently due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Usually we'd be happy to meet you all in person out at the Wake County Commons building for a day of learning and conversations and networking. But instead, this year, we've broken our material down into a series of relatively short videos that you can watch whenever you have the time. We'll miss seeing everyone in person, but hopefully you'll like this format too. It'll allow you to rewatch the videos if you need to, and we encourage you to share them with friends and family who could benefit from the information in them. We've got a great lineup of topics this year. In a lot of ways, this information is more pertinent than ever before. As we've crossed into our second year of the COVID-19 pandemic, we see businesses of all kinds struggling to keep afloat, and we know that includes our farmers. To help you navigate and take full advantage of COVID-19 relief programs available to farmers through the federal government, we have a presentation from the North Carolina office of the USDA Farm Service Agency. We also have videos covering the topics that you've come to expect from Keeping the Farm. That includes a yearly update on changes to the tax code from the Wake County Tax Administration Office. You'll also hear from a local attorney on ways to plan your estate and protect your farm from legal challenges, as well as the Wake County Planning Office, which will provide you an update on PLANWake, which is our massive countywide push to engage our community and develop a comprehensive plan to guide our growth for years to come. It is no secret that Wake County is growing and growing fast. One of the long-term trends we're seeing come out of this pandemic is that people want to leave the densest cities in America for areas that offer a better balance of rural and urban. And that's Wake County. Many people don't realize this, but with nearly 700 farms covering more than 77,000 acres of land, Wake County has more farm and forestry land than the majority of North Carolina counties. COVID-19 has reminded us of the value of open spaces, and no other county in the state has our combination of both booming urban development and vibrant rural agricultural land. We must work to preserve this precious balance that makes Wake County truly unique. Before we get underway, I'd like to turn it over to our Vice Chair, Vicki Adamson, who you'll probably recognize from past years Keeping the Farm workshops. She has a personal connection to farms and has taken a personal interest in helping our local farmers keep their land in the family. Vice Chair Adamson?
Thank you, Chair Calabria. Keeping the farm really is a subject near and dear to my heart. I was raised on a small farm in Iredell County, which is now a housing development, where we had hogs and chickens, and I grew up eating vegetables grown on my family's land. One of the stories I tell young people is in the fall when we butchered the hogs, and of course it was hog killing day, I would be out of school to help because that's an all hands on deck work day to get the hog put up before the meat goes bad. And I would go to school the next day with a note from my mother that said Vicki was needed at home yesterday. It was hog killing day. And today, if some student was to show up with that note, they would probably get social services called on the family that they were butchering hogs in the backyard, which is exactly what we did. To this day, I go out of my way to know where my food comes from. I get produce from a local CSA, and I buy my meat and eggs from a local farmer. I've visited each of these farms in person because the only way to know if a farm is clean is to go see it. More than 10 years ago, I committed to making sure that all the food I buy is grown in the United States. It's not always easy, and I can't always find everything, but it's important to me to support American farmers. I know some of you recently inherited land and now find yourselves owning the family farm for the first time. I'm sure you're feeling a variety of strong emotions, including excitement, pride, and probably more than a little bit of anxiety. And you're probably also very tired from all the work you've been putting in. I want you to know that Wake County is committed to helping you. Our board has adopted a goal to actively encourage the preservation of farmland in our county, and our staff are here to help. We're blessed to have such natural beauty here, and we are truly committed to keeping our open spaces open. Before we get to the meat and potatoes of this workshop, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank our dedicated staff from the Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District. This is such a challenging time for everyone, and they are working harder than ever to help our residents manage their land, water, plant, and wildlife resources effectively. And we have lots of wildlife in Wake County. It makes me proud to know that in a world turned upside down in so many ways, we're not missing a year of keeping the farm. Thanks to our tireless and innovative staff here in Wake County. Looking beyond this workshop, I hope you will take advantage of all the people and resources we have to offer. I think you're really going to like this virtual format, but I have to say, I hope we're back in person next year because I miss the opportunity to see each of you, shake your hand, and hear what we can do as commissioners to make sure your families keep the farm. Thank you and enjoy the workshop this year.
All right, that was great. Thank you to both the commissioners for that warm welcome. And they are right. We do have some of the best staff in Wake County, and our next presenters are definitely worthy of that title. They have been with us every single year for the 16 years of the Keeping the Farm Workshop, and they always do a great job of answering questions to landowners with property tax updates. And so today we have Michelle Lord, the senior appraiser with Wake County Tax Administration Office, and we have Braxton Williford, the appraisal manager with Wake County Tax Administration Office, to go through their tax update. I believe they're going to split that so that you probably hear from both of them today. But we're so lucky to have them and their knowledge. And so we'll let them get started with their presentation.
Good afternoon and welcome to the workshop today. Today we're going to give an overview of properties that are in present use value. We're going to compare 2013 to 2021 just to see how it's going. We're going to talk about how use value is determined. We're going to talk about PUV or present use value requirements. And we're going to talk about how to apply for present use value. Present use value has, in the past 8 years, has gone from 3,613 parcels to 3,523 parcels. That's not a lot of parcel difference. That's 90 parcels that are different. We have noticed, though, that the present use value acreage has gone down by quite a bit, 14% as a matter of fact. We've lost just about 17,000 acres in the past 8 years. There's always been a lot of questions about who determines the use value rates. The use value rates are determined by the Use Advisory Board as under supervision of the NC State University Agricultural Extension. Use value rates are grouped into soil types and then into soil classes. This map shows the different soil classes for agriculture, horticulture, and forestry in Wake County. We're going to go over the basic requirements for use value, which are size, ownership, income, applications, PUV compliance review, and deferred taxes. The minimum size requirements are 10 acres in actual production, and that is actively engaged in the commercial production or growing of crops, plants, or animals for 3 preceding years. Horticulture is 5 acres in actual production for the 3 preceding years, and horticulture would involve fruits, vegetables, nursery, and floral products. Forestry is 20 acres in actual production for the preceding years. Just a little bit of information, additional information on size. Multiple contiguous parcels can be considered a qualifying tract. Parcels that are separated by a road are considered contiguous. Land under improvements used for farming operations can be considered as acreage in production. Home sites are not considered acreage in production. There must be at least the minimum acreage required for each program must be in production every year. Non-contiguous parcels that do not have minimum acres in production qualify under the expansion of a unit exception as long as there is a qualifying parcel under the exact same ownership. Land in another county can be the qualifying parcel as long as it was within 50 miles on a straight line from parcel to parcel, or as the crow flies. Next, we'll go to ownership requirements. For properties that are not in present use value, individuals must have owned the land for 4 full years preceding January 1st of the year the benefit is claimed, or resided on the property on that January 1st. Business entities must have owned the land for a full 4 years preceding that January 1st that the benefit is claimed. For properties that are currently in use value, there is an exception to this ownership requirement. If the property is in PUV at the time of transfer, the new owner can accept the deferred tax liability as long as all the other requirements are met. That parcel or qualifying parcels. Additional information on ownership. Multiple parcels that make up a qualifying tract must be in the exact same ownership. A transfer to a family LLC or family trust is considered a different ownership. Once a deed is recorded, it cannot be undone. We beg you, please, to call our office before ownership change takes place, so we can avoid an unfortunate collection of the deferred taxes. All non-related family members of a business entity must be actively engaged in the farming or forestry operation. If the land is leased to a farmer, it will not qualify. A family business entity may lease to a farmer. Only one member of that LLC or business entity must be actively engaged in the farming or forestry operation. And lastly, the primary business of a business entity must be related to agriculture, horticulture, or forestry.
You got to unshare.
All right. Not letting me undo it. No, no stuff here.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to pick up with the income requirement. There is an income requirement for both agriculture and horticulture. The income requirement is an average of $1,000 over a 3-year period. For forestry use, there is no income requirement due to the long-term nature of growing trees. Although for forestry, owners must follow a written forestry management plan to ensure optimal growth. A little bit of additional information on the income requirement. Agricultural income can come from either agriculture or horticulture products. Although horticulture income can only come from horticultural products. The only exception we've found is sweet potatoes, where they can come from both agriculture and horticulture. Products that are grown on the farm and consumed on the farm can be counted as income. The main example of this would be hay. We also tend to call this value in exchange. This is basically when the livestock are eating a product that the farmer could sell for a profit. Income that is not acceptable would be rental income from the leasing of the land, stud fees, boarding fees, and training or showing animals. And also the renting of hunting rights cannot be included. The application itself. There is an initial application for properties not in PUV as of January 1. The application period is during the normal listing period, which is January 1st through 31st each year. Although an application can be filed after January 31st, but it will be considered a late file application. These can be submitted up through December 31st, but good cause has to be submitted. An initial application only needs to be filed once unless there is a change in the type of use or ownership. Another type of application is the continued use application. A continued use application is for properties that are currently in PUV on the date of the transfer and the new owner wishes to continue the use value. The continued use application must be filed with the tax office within 60 days of the transfer. A continued use application filed after the 60 days will be considered a late file application, and good cause would need to be provided. A continued use application only needs to be filled out once unless there is a change in the type of use or ownership. The new owner must accept the liability of any existing deferred taxes. Some additional application information. If you were to purchase a property in PUV and you want it to remain in PUV, please contact our office and request a continued use application just before the transfer. Let your attorney know that you want to keep PUV on the property so that deferred taxes are not collected at closing. I would also let the seller's attorney know as well. The type of use must also stay the same on a continued use application. If this is your only parcel in PUV, it must also meet the size and income requirements. If this parcel happens to be in addition to other qualifying tracts, it must be in active production. If this is a continued use forestry application, then a forestry management plan needs to be submitted to the office, to our tax office. We do allow the application to be filed and the management plan can be delivered later. Sometimes there is a delay in getting a forestry management plan in place. The PUV compliance review. The Department of Revenue requires that every county in the state review all the PUV parcels at least once every 8 years to verify the eligibility. The last time Wake County did this was in 2017 and 2018. The next review should take place between 2022 and 2025. Although on occasion, we are required to look at individual properties on an as-needed basis. Potential rollback of deferred taxes. If a PUV property happens to lose its eligibility, we are required to collect the deferred taxes for the current year plus the 3 previous years. A rollback could either be for 4 years or 3 years, depending on if the current year taxes have been billed. Once a property loses its eligibility, the deferred taxes are due and payable immediately, and the current year taxes will be due the following January 5th. We do see a lot of DOT taking of PUV properties. Since the DOT is constantly making changes to the amounts of acreage taken, GIS, our Geographic Information Systems, must wait until the right-of-way highway deed is filed with the Register of Deeds. If DOT has not provided the map to GIS, the owner may submit their own survey that has the surveyor's seal and the amount of right-of-way taken. Once the right-of-way is split out, the tax office will create deferred tax bills. A copy of the bills will be sent to the owner and the appropriate DOT division. The general statutes state that in these situations, the deferred taxes will be reimbursed. So you should follow up with your DOT representative. As always, we are here to help. Please feel free to contact us before making any changes to any PUV property. We can work with you to review what you are considering doing and hopefully avoid any unintended loss of your eligibility. You can either call us or email us with any questions. I have up our main contact number, our tax help email address, and we do have additional information on our website at www.wakegov.com. This is our direct information if anybody is interested in contacting Michelle or myself directly. On a side note, Michelle is going to be retiring at the end of September. And I know she has been a huge part of keeping the farm over the years, and she has helped numerous people work their way through changes to their property. Michelle's going to be training a new exemption specialist that hopefully will be just as helpful and knowledgeable as she has been for the citizens of Wake County over the last 10 plus years. She's been basically running our present use value operation. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle and Braxton, for that great presentation. So, and he's right, Michelle, we're certainly going to miss you over here. So, but we'll work on getting you back. So now that you're retired, you can have free time to come on back to keeping the farm for us. So I know we're going to take a little bit of time to make sure there's no questions in the comment or chat boxes. If Michaela, we got our conservation specialist with us from the Wake Soil and Water Office, Michaela Wren, is checking that. So I'll let her tell me if there's any questions.
Yes, we do have one question from Dustin and Burton. He asked, does agritourism count in the income requirements, either in person or virtual, like YouTube?
Okay. For the majority of cases, agritourism income does not count. The best thing for him to do is to give us a call and tell us exactly what he's doing, and we can tell if any part of the income may qualify.
Good point. So that's always a question I have too. So from a lot of farmers. Any more, Michaela?
Let's see, I'm looking through. That's the only one I see right now. If anyone does have questions, feel free. There is a live chat box to the right. If you're watching from YouTube, you can post your questions there. If you're watching from Facebook, there is also a comment box that you can place your questions in. We'll give people a few minutes to see if anything comes in.
I had one that I wanted to ask that I get this quite often, and I just want to make sure that it's stated with Michelle or Braxton, whoever feels comfortable with asking it or answering this question. But I get asked a lot with forestry landowners about their written forest management plan. Do they have to have a registered forester write that forest management plan? Or they have to get the North Carolina Forest Service? Can they do it themselves? So I get that question a lot. So if they could answer that about, as far as the forest management plan goes, what would they be willing to accept for that?
They don't need to have a formal one by a forester. If they're knowledgeable of what needs to be done, of the steps to be taken, and we can even provide the steps that need to be taken and what they need to include in that plan in order for it to qualify.
Thank you. And one other important thing I know Michelle highlighted in her presentation, and I've worked with a lot of landowners over the last 15 years, I guess, here now, is that the deferred taxes, if it does come out of PUB, they said this, deferred taxes are actually due immediately. And so a lot of people don't understand that as well. Those 3 years, could be 4 years, depending on if the current year taxes are paid, but it's not, you're not given any amount of time to pay those roll back taxes. And so they are due immediately. So that is why it's important, and why Michelle was saying, please, if you are going to look at doing anything as far as change of ownerships and things like that, it's very important for you to call the Wake County Tax Administration Office or a Soil and Water Office here, and let us help guide you and get your questions answered as you go about that, and inheriting or giving it to your kids and passing it on to generations and things like that. It's very important for those taxes and not making a mistake, because I've seen a lot of landowners over the last few years make that mistake. So very important. Anything else you see, Michaela?
We have one more question from Will Ormond. He asked, just to clarify, if you rent out your land, does that not count as income?
The renting of the land does not count as income. It has to be a product that is grown or produced on the farm.
Awesome. Good questions. Very good questions. Thank y'all for asking those. And like I said, if you, we will have some time at the end too. So if you think of something as we keep going, that's fine. Just put it in the box there, and they'll be on with us. And like I said, if you'd like to speak with a live person, you can call us and email us at the end, and we'll be glad to take those questions and get you a follow-up answer to make sure we get you the right information and answer your question. So if there's no more, Michaela, at this time, then I will go on to our next agenda item. Very happy and excited to welcome our new executive director, Larry Adams, from the USDA Wake County Farm Service Agency. So I thought this would be a great opportunity. I wish it was in person, Larry, but I thought this would be a great opportunity for our farm and forest landowners to meet you. You're new to Wake County, but I know you worked with us for a short period of time before coming back. So we're excited to have you and lucky to have you. And I'll turn it over to you to present to today. Thank you.
Yes, like Teresa said, my name is Larry Adams. I'm the new Wake County Farm Service Agency County Director. I've been here for a few months, and I'm looking forward to getting to meet more people and get out into the community. If you're not familiar with FSA, our agency's mission is to deliver timely and effective programs and services to American farmers and ranchers as best we can, as well as to protect the food and environmental aspects of it as well. One of our goals is to provide financial safety net for American farmers and ranchers and sustain economically viable agricultural production, as well as to increase the stewardship of Americans' natural resources while enhancing the environment. Farm number requests. Farm number requests are one of the first things that we tell new farm owners or new landowners to do for our agency. This registers you as a farmer as government purposes. The farm numbers go with the land and not the owner. So if you're buying new land, one of the first things I would recommend to do is call us and to see if you have an existing farm number, and we can look that up with the address. If you don't have an existing farm number, all farm number requests go through our county committee. You would just you would fill out a customer information form, name, address, email, things like that. We would need a copy of your deed, and we would need a property map that shows the boundary lines. With that, our county committee looks for any type of sales or any type of receipts of fertilizer, seeds, or plants, or anything that you purchased that will show that you are planning to farm and have a operation that's trying to produce a commodity. Crop reporting is something that we do is annually. You would producers would come in, and usually they would come in and draw on the maps and things like that of different crops that are out there on their farm. This is for government purposes as far as keeping track of the different things growing in Wake County, and also for government programs going forward. Each year, USDA agencies collect data that relating to crops through these crop reports. It is used for safety net programs, conservation programs, and disaster programs. So we know if a disaster does come through, we know who had what and where it was, and we know who should be affected by this particular event. For our fall crops, wheat, rye, oats, barley, and all other fall seed crops, the deadline to report is January 15th. And for spring crops such as corn, soybeans, tobacco, cotton, peanuts, grain, sorghum, any CRP land, sweet potatoes, and any grass for grazing or hay should be reported by July 15th. With these dates comes a grace period of 15 days. If you plant after that January 15th date or July 15th date, you have 15 days to come in and report. And as far as right now with COVID, we're allowing that to be 30. So you have 30 days from that date to come in and report those crops, and we will take it without a late file fee. The late file fee is usually $46 per farm, and that it caps out at 4 farms. So you would have to pay for 4 farms before you're able to keep reporting. The Conservation Reserve Program is a program that we are using. It's grown in popularity over the last few years. It's a voluntary program that contracts with agriculture producers so that environmental sensitive agriculture land is not farmed or ranched, but instead devoted to conservation benefits. CRP establishes long-term resource conserving plant species such as trees and different things that will go as a cover crop to control soil erosion and improve quality of environmental habitats around, as well, wildlife habitats around. In return for doing this for us, FSA will provide a cost share for these type of payments and an annual rental payment. The rental payments vary based off the type of soil that you have, so there's no way to exactly tell you this amount of acreage will be given this amount of payment unless we can go and see the soils and different types of soils. These are soil rental rates. Non-Assured Crop Program, also called NAP. This program provides a financial assistance to producers of non-assured crops that's not covered by RMA or any other insurance agency. And this is to prevent from low yields and crop losses in preventative planting in times of natural disasters. NAP provides basic coverage equivalent to catastrophic level risk protection of insurance coverage. The basic coverage is a 50-55 coverage, which means at 50%, you would have to at least lose 50% of your crop to be eligible, and you would only get 55% of the market value for that crop. There are more coverages that you can keep going up, 60, 65, different things like that. But as you go up in coverages, your premium goes up as well. And with the basic coverage, there is no premium. The service fee cost for one crop is $325 with a cap of $1,950 for multiple counties. So if you're a multiple county producer, you will pay for 6 crops, but you are able to insure more than that. Beginning farmers, limited resources farmers, and socially disadvantaged farmers are able to waive their service fee. So if you certify as one of those groups, your service fee is waived, and you get a 50% payment, 50% premium as well. So if you get the highest coverage you can get, your payment will be 50% of that payment. Organic Certification Cost Share Program. This program reimburses producers and handlers for a portion of their paid certification costs. This program you have to be already certified organic to be included in this program. But once you are certified organic, it helps pay back 50% of the certification cost for each year, up to $500, which helps the organic producers a lot. We're able to help those with some of those fees that they can't help every year. We're able to pay 50% of those costs each year. And you would just bring in your tickets once you have been certified and all of your receipts, and then we will pay once at the end of it. Farm loans. Farm loans offers a variety of loans depending on the needs of your operation. Most popular loans include operating loans, farm ownership, microloans, youth loans, and emergency loans. Operating loans can be used to purchase livestock, seed, and equipment. Could also cover farm operating costs and family living while you get your farm up and running. Farm ownership loans are loans that can be used to purchase or expand a farm. If you want to buy a neighboring farm or something like that, you can use a farm ownership loan, and it also helps with closing costs, construction, or improving buildings on your farm as well. Microloans are a type of operating or farm ownership loan. They have a max of $50,000 for a micro, but it seems to be less paperwork and it's more streamlined. It's a faster process usually. Youth loans are an operating loan for people between the ages of 10 and 20 years old who need assistance with educational agricultural projects. Typically, we see students in the with 4-H or FFA who want one of these youth loans to purchase cattle or hogs for an upcoming event or something like that. And once they sell the hog or the cattle, they would pay that loan back and continue it like that. And it also shows increased responsibility for kids, and a lot of parents have seemed to like this program. Emergency loans help farmers and ranchers recover from production and physical losses due to drought, flooding, and other natural disasters. To be eligible for this type of loan, your county has to be designed as a disaster county for that particular event. And Wake County has not had that in a while. Hopefully we don't have it. We can continue without the emergency loans, but it is an option if needed be. County committee elections. Farmers and ranchers who are elected to serve FSA county committees use their judgment and knowledge to help execute decisions that we have in our office. I lean on my county committee heavily because they are the knowledge. They are everything that we need. If I don't know it, I'm pretty sure somebody in my county committee does know about the situation. Agriculture producers who participate or cooperate in FSA programs may be nominated for candidacy for a county office. If you want to nominate someone, there's a form that you can get online, and it's a FSA 669A. Along with we have 3 LLAs in Wake County. We also have, so that means we have 3 regular members. We also have 2 minority members as well to help provide diversity within on the county committee, and it can keep everybody's interest at stake. I've provided my email address, and the first phone number is my direct line number. The second one is to our office. In our office, we have a key program technician, Sally Rice, and John Deal. He's our program technician. For our area, our farm loan manager is Carlton Grady, and our county committee is made up of Ron Broadwell, he's our chairman, Terry Jackson, he's our vice chairman, and Maylin Dupree is a regular member. Our 2 minority advisors are Jennifer Bunn and James Dunn. If I have any questions, I will answer your question.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that and providing all that contact information for everyone too. So I'll let Michaela take a look and let me know if she sees any questions.
I do not see any at this moment, so I'm going to give individuals a minute or 2 to see if they want to type something in the chat box.
Okay. Larry, I had a follow-up one as well that we get asked. We're working with a lot of landowners and farmers both in our county, and sometimes the landowners are not aware if anything's been reported, on their tracks. How can they find out that information? Who do they call? What do they need to do, especially during these COVID times right now? What's the best way to find out that information?
If you want to see if anything has been reported, you can call our office. If you have the farm number, you can give us the farm number and we can look it up that way. And we can send you the crop reports for the last few years. If you don't know the farm number, we can always look it up and tell you your farm number. But we would get you those records as soon as we could.
Thank you, Larry.
Give individuals just one more minute to see if any last minute comments come in.
I'll just say as we wait, if you're interested in any of the programs that Larry mentioned, you can also contact our office. Our conservationists and staff members are very familiar with all the USDA programs. And of course, we have our Natural Resource Conservation Service, our Team 10 supervisor, Deanna Irizarry is also in our office. And, you know, she would be glad to also talk about the programs and eligibility and who qualifies and all those kind of things. So we're all very intertwined, work together on a lot of programs and help each other. Sometimes when you meet us, you wouldn't know if you're dealing with a county employee, a federal employee, or what, the state employee sometimes. So we're that intertwined, and we're just there to help the customers and the citizens of Wake County, whatever we can do to do that. So just know that we're all here and we work together in the same building, same office. And if you have any other questions about that, just let us know. So you don't see any more at this time, Michaela?
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much again, Larry. And we'll move on to our next agenda item. This is always a very, very popular topic. And I know there's been some changes. There are going to be some upcoming changes with a estate gift and capital gains taxes. That's definitely could have an effect on landowners and farmers, especially in Wake County. Jason Page, an attorney with the law office of Jason R. Page, has also been a great friend of ours in the soil and water office, has been a part of this Keeping the Farm for many years. And as always, he works with a lot of large landowners and farmers, and he knows the ins and outs and how these kind of impacts could affect you, and very knowledgeable. So I'm glad he could be with us virtually this year. And Jason, I'm gonna let you take it away with your presentation.
Thank you. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. All right, so I'm going to try to talk about something that we could talk about for days in 20 minutes, and it's something I've been studying pretty much my whole adult life. So I'm not sure I'm going to get through everything in the detail that you might need, but I do represent a lot of farmers and rural landowners. I was a forester before I went to law school, and I also grew up in Wake County. So I've done this program for several years. So I know there are a lot of the background things that would affect people. So the first thing I have to say is this is not legal advice, and you need to hire your lawyer. And I know that Lawyers Mutual will probably appreciate me putting all that in here.
Hey, Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize for interrupting. We're seeing your background slides, like your notes section.
Oh, okay.
You may have to unshare and then share it again.
Okay. Any better?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So let me see. All right. So there's lots of taxes we could talk about. I'm going to focus on the transfer taxes today, but there's gift tax, estate tax, generation skipping transfer tax, capital gains tax, and then ordinary income tax. And we have to separate those, and there's all kinds of different rules that apply to each one. So the transfer taxes are the estate, gift, and generation skipping taxes, and this is unrelated to income. These are just your ability to transfer wealth to someone else is taxed if it's over the exemption amount. And the point of this is to keep you from becoming increasingly wealthy over generations and generations. And so that what the government determines is too wealthy has changed over the years. And right now, as we'll see, we're in a pretty high exemption period. So to understand why this matters and how it works, we have to first understand what the gross estate is and how it's taxed. So the definition in the Internal Revenue Code of the gross estate is pretty much everything you own in the whole world And it's actually probably a little more broad than that, because there are things like incidents of ownership in a life insurance policy, or a general power of appointment under a trust that you may not even realize would be considered part of your gross estate. But we have to take that gross estate and then subtract the deductions to determine your taxable estate. And the deductions we'll talk about today are mainly the charitable deduction and then the marital deduction. And so we'll get to that in a second, but we also have to look at reportable gifts. So there's right now this unified credit amount, which is $11.7 million for this year. And so we take your taxable estate and then we add your reportable gifts and we subtract out your unified credit, and that's the taxable amount. And that's a pretty large oversimplification of that, but it gets you the gist of what we're trying to do. And basically, if that amount that's left is more than $1 million, you pay 40% tax on that transfer of wealth. So that credit amount is what matters. And right now, that amount's 11.7 million. The way that number is determined is we take $10 million in 2010 and adjust it for inflation. So every year it goes up a little bit. Inflation's a strange thing because we have inflationary things, and then we have deflationary things, and then we have whatever they use to measure inflation. So the inflation rate might be 2% while the value of your house went up 50%. It's not going to be always something that makes sense. One issue that we know we have on the horizon is that in 2026, that credit will be reduced to $5 million in 2010, adjusted for inflation. So in 2025, you could have a $12 million exemption, and then January 1, 2026, it could go down to $6 million. The Biden proposal during the campaign was to reduce that to 2009 levels, which was a $3.5 million estate tax exemption with a 45% maximum rate. I don't think that this is going to be the top tax priority. What we're hearing is that there's an infrastructure focus, and that would likely be funded with an increase in corporate taxes and maybe an increase in income tax on people who make over $400,000. And the corporate tax is beyond what I deal with, but we do know it's out there on the horizon, and we know at least it's going to be cut in half if the law is not extended, and I doubt there's going to be an appetite right now to extend the Trump era tax rules past 2026. So the marital deduction, the charitable deduction, and portability are also important concepts here. So you can give your spouse, if your spouse is a U.S. citizen, as much as you want to without tax. You can also leave a charity an unlimited amount. And there's obviously lots of rules around both of these, but if you do it right, you can defer estate tax until the second spouse dies. And any unused exemption amount can be ported to your spouse. And it's important to know that that is not automatic, that you have to do something to port that unused exemption. And what you have to do is file a Form 706 estate tax return and elect portability. So if you die this year with a $2 million estate and it goes to your children, then you have $9.7 million left that could be ported over to your spouse. And when there was an $11.7 million exemption, and we're not really too worried about it going down in the near term, you know, most people didn't think much about making a portability election. I think that's going to become more important over time. But as I said earlier, with proper planning, you can avoid estate tax liability when the first spouse dies. This makes my head hurt to just think about this, but if there is a generation skipping transfer tax as well, and I wanted to mention it just so you know it's out there. It really doesn't affect you unless you have a taxable estate. But the essence of this is the government wants to get their tax at every generation. So the law taxes direct skips, taxable distributions, taxable terminations that are above the exemption amount. The easiest way to explain that is that if I have a $20 million estate and there's a $10 million exemption and I leave and no spouse, and I leave $10 million to my child and $10 million to my grandchild, well, the effect of that is your child would not be taxed at his or her death on that second $10 million. You're trying to avoid that second taxation. So they're going to go ahead and impose a generation skipping transfer tax now. So what you'd want to do is make the allocation to the GST to the grandchild. And that example I gave is, again, an oversimplification. There are automatic allocations, and that might be an automatic allocation. I don't know. But the point is, you can't just skip the generations and not pay the tax at the next generation unless you're under the exemption amount. And GST exemption right now is the same as the estate tax exemption, but they can become decoupled. So if I give my son $1 million and that comes off of my estate tax exemption, but it would not come off of my GST exemption, so you end up with exempt and non-exempt trust shares. And that can really be confusing, particularly in a marital trust with a reverse Q-tip trust, which I won't go into now. But the point is, you have to think about it if you're wealthy enough for that to matter. Basis is what matters to most people. And capital gains, while there's a big estate tax exemption, we always want to get that basis step up so we avoid the capital gain tax when the property is sold. So if you think about what that is, a capital gain is just a gain that's realized when an asset is sold at a price higher than its basis. And there's long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains. So if you bought Coca-Cola stock in 1980 and it was $10 a share or something, and you held it until now and it's $50 a share, you have a basis that's pretty low in that stock. So when you sell it, you'll owe a long-term capital gain. But if you bought GameStop in December for $18 and you sold it for $300 in January, that's going to be treated as ordinary income because it's a short-term capital gain. And what we're looking at here is land. So when you inherit, that's going to be a long-term capital gain. So generally, property that's included in your gross estate will receive a basis adjustment upon your death. So and I just said property inherited at your death, if you sell it, it will be treated as a long-term capital gain. You don't have to wait a year if you inherit it. Your basis is adjusted to the fair market value on the date of death, but that's if it's included in the gross estate. And the current maximum long-term capital gains rate is 23.8% versus, I think, 37% for ordinary income. So it's a pretty big difference. And we do see problems with someone losing the basis step up. For instance, I give my property to my children and I don't do something to pull it back into my estate, like a life estate, a reserved life estate, then they don't get a basis step up, they get my basis in it. The Biden proposal is to eliminate the basis adjustment and also to tax capital gains as ordinary income if you make more than $1 million a year. Eliminating the basis adjustment would be a big deal for rural landowners. And also, it would be a big deal for other people as well. I mean, think about if your parents bought a house in 1975 for $25,000, and then when they die, it's worth $225,000, and you sell it right now, you don't pay any tax on that. If the basis step up goes away, then you'd have $200,000 in capital gains. So that's 30 to 50 some $1,000s in federal tax on that. So it can be a pretty big deal. And I've said basis step up. It could be a step down. It's really just an adjustment to fair market value. So where that leaves us right now is that for estates that are definitely not going to be taxable, you can focus on maximizing the basis. So ensure that it's in somebody's estate when they die so that you get a step up. And the planning strategies to use can ensure successive basis adjustments. So you could leave property in a way that stepped up when one spouse dies, also stepped up when the next spouse dies, also stepped up when the child dies, going to grandchildren. You can focus on other planning issues as well, like asset protection or keeping land in your family, and not necessarily let taxes determine what you do. And for states that are fairly small right now, and small is a relative term, but if it's possible that it could become more than $3.5 million later, you should consider making a portability election, because we don't know what your spouse's exemption might be 3.5 while yours is 11.7. The estates that could be taxable, where we're sort of in a unknown territory, and that's a broad range of estates, because if you have $3 million estate right now, that might be a $7 or $8 or $9 million estate later. And we don't know what the exemption amount might be. It might go down to 7. It might stay where it's at, and you don't have a taxable estate. So flexibility is the key in these size estates, especially if you're married, because you need to be able to maximize basis if that is in your best interest, but also protect from estate tax in case the exemption goes down. And we'd be talking about a difference between selling for if you sold later, dealing with the basis on the date of your death versus paying a 40% estate tax. So most people, when forced with the choice, do I take a carryover basis when the spouse dies, or a child dies, or do I pay a 40% estate tax now, would probably pay that 23.8% later versus 40% now. So there are some second look strategies, like a disclaimer trust and a Clayton election, that can be helpful for married couples. And for example, a Clayton election says, I'm leaving my share to a bypass trust that will be in my estate, but will skip my spouse's estate. But if my wife or husband makes a Q-tip election, it goes to a marital trust that would get a second step up in basis when my spouse dies. So that is a tool we use a lot. The disclaimer trusts also say if the survivor files a disclaimer, the assets go to a bypass trust. One of the most important tools here might be just making the portability election from a tax perspective. And then if we have estates that are clearly taxable, the IRS has said if you don't use your exemption, you lose it. So if it goes from 12 million to 6 million, you might have lost $2.4 million in taxes you could have saved had you used that exemption up before it went down. And If there are no retroactive changes, you can give away up to $11.7 million in 2021, use up that large exemption amount, and also freeze the value of the assets transferred by keeping them out of your estate. So you have to think about successive generations then. Now, obviously, not many people have to worry about this. Most of us are in the clearly not taxable range, but there's a growing number of people in that middle range. So the summary, the future rates and exemption amounts are unknown, but probably going down. You need flexibility in your planning, and maximizing basis may be more of a concern than transfer taxes. You should always make an evaluation when someone dies who's married, whether to make a portability election. And for states that exceed the current exemption amount, you have to look at using your exemption. It's not always a good idea, but sometimes it might be. So that's a lot of information packed into a few minutes. But if y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Awesome job, Jason. Thank you. You did a lot and covered a lot in the short period of time. So we appreciate that. So I'll give a few minutes because people may be trying to go through that, and Michaela can tell me if she has any questions that she sees.
Don't see any questions at this time. See a couple comments, great information. There was also a comment that said it is tough to think about, especially during grieving time. It is surprising that sometimes assets are more than a family actually realizes.
Yes, absolutely. That's great. And that's my point, and why it's so important for us to host a Keeping the Farm workshop every year, and for Jason, and we've had several other ones present on this topic as well. And we usually do, when we're there in person, we do a great job talking about estate planning as well. And that's really what this kind of goes into, is estate planning and tax advice and doing that. And I think it can kind of show from Jason's presentation that, looking at the next generation and looking at farm planning and estate planning down in the future is very important, not only for taxes and things like that and making those best decisions, but just to make sure that the next generation and stuff is not caught off guard and not knowing, what to expect to come up. That's something that we've worked with local farmers and landowners here in Wake County a lot of trying to make sure they have a plan for that next successional type generation coming up, and to know how to if they want to keep the farm and keep it productive, making those correct decisions and getting the right advice. And so I guess that, I guess we can kind of wrap it up, Jason, by saying, that it is very important for those that don't have a plan in place, that don't know the answer to some of these questions or what to do, is to get advice, not necessarily with you, Jason, but somebody that's an expert in this topic that knows this and that can help them answer those questions and plan for the future. Would you kind of wrap that up and say that, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to mention one more thing from Maria's comment, that it's tough to think about this when you're grieving. There are also some time constraints on when you can make some of these elections. So, for instance, a disclaimer must be made within 9 months, and you have to file an extension for an estate tax return, and the final is due within 15 months. So there are a lot of things you have to do. And if you haven't thought about this beforehand, then it can be a problem. So certainly there's a lot of good lawyers in Wake County that can help people with this.
That's right. So, and like I said, if you have questions, need us to, refer you or whatever, just please contact us. We'll, like I said, provide our contact information so that we can put you in the right contact with Jason and anybody else he can refer you to that can help you with this kind of advice and questions. Like I said, he's not trying to provide professional advice, but at least make you educated on the kind of things that can happen and what's going on and the changes as they come about. And like he says, they're constantly changing, can go up and down, and you just don't know from year to year or from 10 years from now what that value is going to be. And so it's important to be proactive and go ahead and have a plan in place and know what's going to happen before it happens. So Great job. See anything else, Michaela?
I do not see any more questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Again, Jason will be with us, and we got his contact information, so just let us know, and we'll follow up with him. Next on our agenda, and thinking about that and looking at planning, so this is a great move into you, Leanne. So we have Leanne Hammerbacher, Director of Land Protection and Stewardship East with our Triangle Land Conservancy. Again, another one of our collaborative partners here in Wake County that we're working hard with to preserve and protect open space and conservation areas that we work with, and has been a generous sponsor. I want to do a shout out for you, Leanne. Triangle Land Conservancy has always been a generous sponsor of all of our Keeping the Farm workshops, and always been a huge part of that, making it a success. So thank you, Leanne, and for y'all being here. And she's going to talk about conservation options for your farm. So I'll let you take it away, Leanne.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to share my screen here. And thanks for having me. This is always a great program. I think this was actually the last large public event I went to before COVID all hit. So I'm really thankful to the soil and water staff for pulling this together and not missing a year despite everything that's gone on in the past year. It's a great program with so many great presenters, and I can't emphasize enough what Teresa and Jason just said. You really need to think about what you want the future of your farm or forest land to be, and come up with a plan for it, and have those dining room table conversations, and really talk through this with your family and other folks that have an ownership stake in the farm. So I'll try to get full screen here. All right, great. So as I said, I'm Leanne Hammerbacher. I'm the Director of Land Protection and Stewardship East for Triangle Land Conservancy. And we're going to talk a little bit about conservation options for your farm for the next generation. In case you're not familiar with TLC, our mission is here. We strive to create a healthier and more vibrant Triangle region by safeguarding clean water, protecting natural habitats, supporting local farms and food, and connecting people with nature. We serve the 6-county Triangle area, including Wake County. You can see green dots, which are indicators of where we have had a conservation project on the ground. These are properties that TLC owns or holds conservation easements on, or has helped another entity such as a government agency acquire and transfer them to. So we work all over the area. You can also see our green blobs, which are areas where we prioritize work, but there's a lot of green dots outside of those green blobs. So if you're interested in these options, feel free to reach out to us. Those green blobs do indicate areas where we have developed conservation plans, and they are a priority for us, and in most cases have some potential funding resources for land protection options. In Wake County, those really are the Upper Neuse area around Falls Lake, Swift Creek, which is also a drinking water resource, and then the Marks Creek region in Eastern Wake. In addition, we have been partnering with the town of Cary and are hopeful that we can get a watershed protection program similar to our Falls Lake program initiated in the Jordan Lake watershed. For those of you not familiar with the Falls Lake program, there is funding allocated through the City of Raleigh Public Utilities that can help support acquisitions of land and also conservation easements. So we protect land for those 4 main key public benefits I just mentioned, including local food and farms. Well, why is this important? Well, we are rapidly losing our farmland. The recent report said 133 acres a day. There's only 46,000 farms that remain in North Carolina. And an interesting stat, 5 times as many farmers are over the age 65 as under 35. So we are going through a real transition in our land ownership in this state. And in fact, we think between 2001 and 2016, more than 731,000 acres of agricultural land were developed. North Carolina happens to be the 2nd most threatened state in the nation for farmland loss. And I think Wake County is right up there with being the highest county for farmland loss in the state. TLC is taking several actions to try to help conserve and support the remaining farms in our area. That includes protecting farms with conservation easements. It also means partnering with other farm organizations like our UCAN partnership and Transplanting Traditions, where TLC is providing farmland to other farmers and groups to farm on site. It also means being involved in farmland protection plans, the food security plans, and other initiatives to support farmland protection throughout our area. In addition, we run 2 farm preserves, one at our Irvin farm outside of Carborough, and our newest farm preserve, which is our Williamson Preserve in Eastern Wake County that I'll talk about in a little bit. Lastly, we help landowners secure working lands and conservation easements on their property. So what are some of the things you can do to protect your land in the short run and long run? Well, really critical, we've already talked about this a lot, but plan for the future of your farm now. Think about conservation plans, work with soil and water, work with your local forester on forest management and conservation plans. Develop forest stewardship plans. Think about that farm transition and what the next step is. All of these plans can help support your farm and help support the resources on your farm. And there's even often cost share opportunities like Larry talked about for these types of programs. In addition, Wake County has a voluntary agricultural district, which is a great voluntary program to show the county and your neighbors that you're committed to supporting production and protecting your farm. In addition, as farmers start to age out and need a transition or are looking for other resources, if you want to keep your farm in production, programs like the PLANWake program, which is a website kind of like match.com for farmers and farm landowners, can be a useful tool, as well as the Next Gen program I'll talk about in a little bit, and other land sharing opportunities. In the longer term, if you really want to permanently protect your land, conservation easements or conservation sale or donation or a transfer could be a potential option. I'll talk a little bit more detail about conservation easements. A conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement between a landowner and a qualified conservation organization that permanently limits certain uses of the land to protect its conservation values. With a conservation easement, the landowner continues to own and manage the property, and they can even sell it in the long run. But the easement is a legally binding agreement that runs with the deed and can restrict certain things like future subdivision or residential development. In Wake County itself, Triangle Land Conservancy has helped protect about 3,000 acres of land, and about half of this land falls under a conservation easement. All of the pictures in this slideshow presentation are from easements and fee simple properties that TLC has helped protect. So why would anyone do this? Well, I think it really comes down to wanting to conserve your land and protect that legacy. This is a quote from a farmer we worked with this past fall to put a conservation easement on their farm property in Chatham County. And they said, quote, "Being the 6th generation family owner, it was a no-brainer, doing what our ancestors would have done if this program were available at that time. Sometimes being good stewards of the land means going beyond the daily blood, sweat, and tears of working the farm. It means taking a stand for what you believe in." Another actually cattle farmer we worked with, Molly Cohen, said, "After all these years of putting all this work into my farm, I didn't want a development to go up on my land as soon as I was under the ground 6 feet. I wanted to keep this beautiful place like it is." Another dairy farmer we worked with said, quote, Janice Lindley, "We wanted to protect our land so that people sitting here 50 or 100 years from now could see exactly what we're seeing today." And this was actually the window she was looking out of when she made that comment. There's other reasons you might want to consider a conservation option. This is a property, Windsong Farm, which is adjacent to our Williamson Preserve and has a conservation easement on it. The family, the Conyers who owned the property, had cared for this land for over 40 years, but got to a point in life where they needed to move into a facility with more care and support. They wanted to know that if they sold their property, it would remain a farm and help preserve all the work they had invested over the years. So the family actually worked with us on a conservation easement before they put the land on the open market. We recorded the conservation easement, and the property was listed subject to the easement, and they actually had no problems at all selling this property and had the pride of knowing that their land would be as they wanted it to be and help protect all the work and effort they had put into it. Another example of a conservation buyer was a group, the Earthsea Collective, we worked with in Durham. They were actually able to buy a property that was going up for sale adjacent to them, and we were able to bring some funding and resources through that watershed protection program to buy an easement on the property and help enable the purchase of the property as a whole. This is an easement in Wake County that was donated to Triangle Land Conservancy off of Old Mill Burney Road, has 133 acres and about a 15-acre working farm on it. In addition to these open working lands, we also work with forest landowners. This is actually two different easements in Wake County where the landowners have taken on an investment on their own to help reestablish longleaf pine, which is quite rare in our county, but the easement helps protect this critical natural resource and supports the long-term goals of the landowners. In addition to those open agricultural areas and forests, we also support easements on natural areas. Our smallest easement is actually on an 1.5 acre native wildflower garden in downtown Raleigh, known as the Reed Garden. These easements help protect rare and critical species that are rapidly disappearing from our area. And oftentimes our easements use a combination of these. They'll have natural areas, working forest land, and open areas. Typically when we're looking at easements, this native wildflower one is a little bit of an anomaly. We're looking at least 10 or so more acres under easement, but we're always happy to talk to anyone that has questions or conservation interests. So again, how does the easement impact your land? Well, it allows you to continue to own and manage, and often allows for continued farming, forestry, passive recreation, and can allow for a certain number of additional structures, farm improvements, barns, that kind of thing. And the landowner does retain the right to manage, to transfer, or sell the property. All the easements are a little different. They are catered both to the interest of the landowner, or if there is funding involved, there's often template or easement requirements from the funding agency. This is not a quick or limited resource project. Easements can take a lot of time. We have had some landowners who have graciously donated easements to us, and there can be both some estate and income tax advantages associated with those. Those typically take less resources and time than if we're doing a partial purchase or purchase of an easement. When you start to involve local, state, and federal resources, which are often limited, it can be quite time consuming. This is a slide from the North Carolina Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund, which does have some limited resources for purchasing conservation easements on working lands. And you can see from their slides from 2015 to 2019, typically about a 4-year process from the time a landowner reaches out to a land trust to the time we actually close on the project. We've worked on projects that have taken 2 months and also ones that have taken 10 years. In addition to conservation easements, Triangle Land Conservancy also owns lands outright. We own a fair amount of farmland. This is a picture from a farm that we own 40 acres on the shores of Lake Benson. This was another example of where watershed protection money was able to help us support the acquisition of this farm. And our latest and greatest preserve is the Bailey and Sarah Williamson Preserve. This 400-acre tract is located in eastern Wake County in the Shotwell area on the Wake-Johnson County line. In September of this year, we actually opened this as our first farm and nature preserve. It's open from dawn to dusk, although check our website if it's been raining, because we do shut down the trails in the rain. But it has about 10 miles of trail and currently has 3 working farmers on it. Our goal is that this will be a farm and nature preserve that provides areas for recreation, but also provides an agricultural demonstration and educational site and a place to help cultivate new and beginning farmers in the region. I'm actually coming live to you from the upstairs. You can see my window there of our new satellite office. This is our farm office. We'll be restored an old pack house and is on the property. Due to COVID, we haven't had many visitors, but we're hoping in the next few months that will be changing. As I mentioned, it is a farm and nature preserve. There are trails on the property which are open to the public. It's free to access dawn to dusk, so come out and visit us. We have started a next generation farmer project in collaboration with Wake County. The goal of this project is really to provide training, access, and resources for new and beginning farmers. We have this is in partnership as well with the Center for Environmental Farming Systems with North Carolina State University. And we have our first cattle farmer on the site at Williamson, who is working about 20 acres, New Bowl Farms. They are practicing regenerative and rotational grazing techniques. And these are pictures from last year, but we just had a few more baby cows born this week. So again, our whole goal is that this can become an educational resource for the entire farming community. I mentioned that farmer is in partnership with North Carolina Choices and SEVS. I'm sure this slide is a little difficult to read, but we did work for the Center for Environmental Farming System, who secured a grant from the Beginning Farmer and Rancher program through NRCS. And the goal of this program is really to place new and beginning ranchers on specific types of land, including land trust land, woodland plots, and solar areas. If you're interested in this program at all, Lee Nina's contact information is on the bottom, and they are definitely looking for both farmers and landowners being a part of this partnership. And our goal with the program is that, again, we can provide this educational and training farm, as well as a place for the public to access the nature preserve. This is an excerpt from our agricultural conservation plan for the Williamson Preserve that we're in the midst of working on. In addition, we are seeking additional farmers on the preserve. You can go to our website and there is a request for proposals there if you're interested in seeing how this program works and or submitting an application for farmland use. In addition to conservation easements and buying land or having land donated outright to Triangle Land Conservancy, we also work very closely with partners such as Wake County Open Space, even state parks and other state agencies to help them acquire land or conservation easements. So if you're interested in one of those programs, feel free to reach out to us and we are happy to help you navigate that process as well. So that was a brief summary of our work. Like Jason could probably do an hour plus on each one of those topics, but I think I'll stop at this point and see if there's any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Leanne, for a great presentation and beautiful pictures of Wake County there too. So it's always great to see those pictures. I'll let Michaela, it may take a second to get any questions in, but if she sees anything initially.
I don't see any questions at this time. We did have a comment by Maria. She said that Williams Preserve is incredibly beautiful. I have to agree with her.
Thank you.
anybody that's been out there for sure. So
I'll give
this-
people.
this is one of the topics, you know, that has definitely been coming up a lot lately with a lot of the farmers and landowners that we work with, as far as, you know, they're thinking about the future. I've had some conversations with some from just in the past week. And you know, our next presenters, we talk about PLANWake, and like Leanne said, you know, Wake is under a considerable amount of pressure for development. And we're kind of having that rural ag, you know, interface, I call it, where it's colliding, you know. And so with a lot of subdivisions popping up in farming communities in those areas. And so I think it's critical to keep the communication open between the different land uses, and to show that agriculture and farming and conservation and all those are still very important to the county, and keeping some of those lands in that. So that's one good thing that Leanne and Triangle Lake Conservancy has been working hard to do over the years, is trying their best to preserve and help as many as they can, working with, like you said, with Wake County Open Space, you know, working with the ADFP, the Farmland Preservation Program that we have with the state, and the federal one as well. So all of these federal, state, local, nonprofit, all these agencies are continuing working together and doing the best we can to try to preserve as much as we can in Wake County of what's left of our open and forest land and ag land as well. So you see anything, Michaela?
We do have one more comment from Joni. She said she enjoyed the polled Hertford cattle preserve.
Yes. Yeah.
She herself has black baldy beef cattle.
Yes. And we value the relationship, you know, with looking at those pictures. You know, the Wake Soil and Water District has actually been involved with the Next Gen program as well, and working with those farmers like New Bowl Farms and stuff with, you know, rotational grazing system and planning for livestock watering and things like that as well. So we love that partnership, Leanne, and love working with those innovative farmers and helping them achieve their conservation objectives, what they want to do on those farms. So we really enjoy that. So, and he does a great job. So.
And we really are hoping to open this up for more educational programs and tours of the farm areas this coming year. So if there's any farmers out there interested in some of the practices we have in place and want to see them in person, definitely reach out to Teresa or I. Yes. Or any of the other conservation staff. And I'll also mention, especially with some of the purchased easement programs like the state's ADFP program and the federal agricultural lands easement program, the applications and process take a lot of time. So typically those are due in December and February, but it is best to reach out to us at least 6 months plus in advance if you're interested in them, so we can start to think if they would be applicable to your site or not.
Great advice. Absolutely. That's true. As you know, it takes time to get all this together and to work through those channels and the application processes and all the things they need to support that application. So it's very important to get those conversations started very early. So to do that. If we don't see any more, Michaela, if you give me the okay, we'll move to the next topic.
You can move forward.
Okay, awesome. Last on our agenda, we have PLANWake, Wake County Planning, Development, and Inspections Office here. We have Terry Nolan, the Planner 3. And we also have, I know, I see her on the call, Sharon Peterson, our Long Range Planning Administrator as well, both from Wake County Planning. And they're going to give us an update on the PLANWake. They may actually have some news for us about the Wake County Commissioners meeting yesterday and maybe what happened with PLANWake. So I'm not going to take that from them, but I'll let them update us and what the future holds for Wake County and the planning and looking at agriculture and trying to preserve that as much as we can. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Terry.
Thank you very much, Teresa. We are happy to be here and want to concentrate more on some of the next steps, because the good news is our Board of Commissioners did make a motion to adopt this plan at their regular meeting on Monday. Because we're holding our meetings virtually, this topic is actually going to carry over into the next regularly scheduled BOC meeting for formal adoption, but it was good news, and our commissioners had a lot of very good things to say about PLANWake, and had some comments related to preserving agriculture and maintaining some of our open spaces. So just real quickly, PLANWake is it's a high-level policy guide to help us guide our future and really kind of ask these questions. Wake County is growing very rapidly, about 62 people per day, and we will add an additional 250,000 people over the next decade. So how do we plan for those additional people? How do we provide transportation, housing, and the services that shall be needed? We did a lot of outreach during this 2-year process, most of it done pre-COVID. And what came out of our community engagement is that there were 4 key community preferences that people said that they wanted. They felt that significant change is needed to plan for growth, that they want to see open space and natural areas protected, that they'd like to see new growth directed to existing towns and cities, and they want to see more walkable environments. And these are kind of the 4 guiding principles that really have guided this process. So PLANWake contains 3 major components: key vision outcomes that are meant to guide our decision making, a development framework map which identifies the areas where we want to direct growth and what the character of those areas would look like, and then metrics so that we can track and measure our progress in meeting our objectives. And the comprehensive plan topics are dealt with at a very high level and focus on the outcomes that we want to achieve, and kind of understand that the implementation will be carried out through what we would call operational plans. So we care about affordable housing. Our affordable housing plan is going to have really the details for how we're going to meet those objectives. Same goes for our rural economic development plan that will help carry out and more specifically implement some of the things that we're recommending here. PLANWake is about growing intentionally to make sure the costs and benefits are equitable throughout Wake County. It contains these 6 high-level policies. These policies were contained in the old 1990s land use plan, and during the many months of COVID, we spent a good deal of time, our project team and stakeholders, in hammering out how are these policies going to carry over into PLANWake, given the kind of the new framework and the new direction that we want to go as a county. I'll touch on 2 of them. With the water supply watersheds, and we have several in Wake County. It is our recommendation that the basic way that we manage our water supply watersheds does not change. So we manage our watersheds as a very low density use, that we do not allow public utilities to be in the watersheds, and that is to protect the water quality. PLANWake carries forward that basic recommendation. And then with extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, some people may be familiar with this. So the land use plan contains criteria for how the Board of Commissioners should evaluate requests from municipalities for extending ETJ. And while it is certainly still very important for municipalities to have ETJ so that they can plan for growth and plan for infrastructure, we changed some of our criteria to really try and stress and encourage smaller, more targeted ETJ requests from municipalities. We want to have stronger collaboration between the county and municipalities so that these are targeted and really well planned for, well thought out places for municipal growth. So we have a heavy lift after the plan is officially adopted. First, we need to look at our UDO, our Unified Development Ordinance, and revise our UDO to help carry out some of the recommendations in the plan. We're seeking to do better with protecting our natural resources. So we will be looking at the UDO, which details our development and design specifications. We will look to update area plans. We have several area plans that are pretty old, and area planning is an important way to engage the landowners and the residents at a smaller level and really kind of get into more of the details of what do these areas need, where should they go, and then also looking at what tools are we going to use for these vision outcomes. We look to strengthen our tools that support rural economies. We have discussed at length with our rural stakeholders, including the Voluntary Ag District Board, Soil and Water Conservation, having discussions about what the rural areas are going to need. We've also done some initial look at some other models that are out there in the country that we may want to adopt here in terms of how do we support our rural economies. And then we have some kind of basic metrics that we identified in our plan for, how do we want to measure our success. We will continue to add some new metrics and decide how we're going to track and report on those on an annual basis, so that we can look at how we're doing and implement new tools as they're needed. In terms of recommendations in PLANWake, there aren't a lot of very specific recommendations, although with supporting rural working lands, PLANWake is probably it probably goes into the greatest specificity when it comes to rural working lands and what we can and should do to support farms and working lands. And these are basically generally what was recommended in the plan. What we heard during our process from rural landowners and rural residents are kind of these bullet points right here. People were very concerned with trespassing on their land, people coming onto their land and shooting guns, encroachment, which they kind of saw it as subdivisions that were popping up in these rural areas that were creating concerns in terms of traffic and stormwater impacts from nearby development. We heard a lot about stormwater impacts, and we've made some process changes already. So now we include soil and water conservation staff when we look at proposed development. So they are included in those discussions about, a new development is being proposed in the rural areas. They have some input on, how some stormwater impacts may be mitigated through that. People have voiced concern about having their land in a municipal ETJ. State law does offer some protections for people that have working lands, but we did hear people were concerned about the regulations that might come from the municipalities in being in an ETJ. That's one reason why we changed some of our criteria to try and be more mindful of the lands and the landowners that wish to remain in rural areas and wish to remain farming. That we want to be mindful of what it means to be in an ETJ. And then we heard kind of these other two things, options for retirement and options for the next generation. And the other presenters that we heard from today offered a lot of programs that people may be interested in that give people options, for rather than having to sell their land to a developer, which they may not want to do, ways that they can still get value from their land. if they don't wish to continue farming, as well as, how to make sure that the next generation has the right tools, has the right training, knows what their options are to continue that farming operation. So these are the main concerns that we heard throughout our process. We intend to continue to engage rural landowners and our other stakeholders like TLC, Soil and Water Conservation, and Voluntary Ag District as we move forward into the next steps. I am curious if anyone wants to comment. We have a lot that we need to do in the next, after our plan is adopted to carry out what's being recommended in the plan. So how might we prioritize what we do next? If someone wants to add a comment in the chat, if you're watching, be interested in hearing your feedback on, where do we start? We need to tackle it all, but what might be a good priority to, programs and training to support farming, and that includes, beefing up our open space program for purchase of lands or conservation easements, as well as concentrating on training the next generation of farmers. Number two, changing county development standards to protect neighboring farmlands and discouraging encroachment. That could be things like making sure that there are adequate buffers between new development and existing farmlands, or possibly changing the yield that a developer might get, or protecting large tracts of intact natural area, canopy, tree canopy, those types of things. And third, encouraging growth in municipal areas to take the pressure off of rural areas. We identified areas that could see a lot more growth, and we're not talking about tall towers everywhere, but there are areas that are underutilized within Wake County that could see redevelopment, infill, particularly around transit corridors and major interchanges on the highway. That could, if we went a little bit denser in those areas, could help take some of the pressure off those rural areas. We're interested in continuing our conversation with stakeholders. This is my contact information, as well as Sharon Peterson, who's been with the county for a long time and has greater expertise and institutional knowledge than I do in terms of what we have used and what could be used. Our final plan is on our project website at planwake.org. There's also a link to an interactive development framework map. You can click on that link and you can zoom in and out, and you can see what the development framework is. You can also search for your property and see where you fall into it in terms of, is it an area where we anticipate a lot of growth in the near future, or is it an area that we'd like to see remain more rural, see less growth in those areas. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome job, Terry. That's a great presentation. Great slides and great information too for those. So I know it may take a minute for Michaela to just any questions that come in or that may be typing in. So you see anything yet, Michaela?
I don't see any at this moment, but I'll give individuals a minute or two.
Yeah. I just wanted to follow up with Terry because I know she said it'd be great to get feedback on sort of the priorities. And I don't want to speak for all the farming and ag community, but I will speak for behalf of the ones that I have been trying to help. And I actually had one yesterday approach me again and was showing me a new subdivision and the impacts they were having to his farm and his crop fields due to the runoff again. It's a brand new one that I visited yesterday. And so I think in my eyes, and I'm just gathering just the data that I have as director of soil and water and the amount of calls that I received and people that's reached out to our office for assistance, I would think that changing the county development standards to protect neighboring farms is probably the most prioritized number one for that going forward. Just because When that happens, there's a lot of damage to the farm, and especially if it's crop fields, or there's a lot of damage, erosion, stormwater runoff, and things that are causing damage to those farms. And I think there's a high susceptibility of that farm failing because of that damage. As you look at farmers, with weather and with the natural disaster events, it's hard enough to farm and to make a profit. But when you're having to battle the weather, natural disasters, maybe insects or anything that could happen that year on your farm, but also trying to battle development next door that is also causing resource concerns, nutrient runoff, erosion, problems, because the farmer needs good quality soil to grow crops and to be productive and to keep that farm productive. And when those resources are washed away or depleted or affected in some way due to runoff, it does impact them long term. So that's this is how I feel for the planning and looking at it from our office, because that is our biggest clients is farm and agriculture producers in the county. And I feel like there's a threatened nature there for a lot of people, because the ones that's calling me is not just one farmer, but it's numerous farmers over a whole area that are being impacted, and they just don't have the resources or the money to help treat and address that stormwater runoff that's now coming through their property, and they're having to take it out of their coffers and their money to try to address that. So I look at that as being the number one priority that I think that we could really help with initially. And then I think, now that y'all have identified those rural areas and the open space funds for conservation easements, I think that would be the next one is, now that we have these open space funds and these bonds and stuff, how can we prioritize and purchasing, conservation easements to protect, vital farmland? Maybe looking at the soils and looking at which ones are really rich and very productive soils for farmland in rural areas, and how can we protect those, and maybe purchasing those conservation easements to make sure that we do have this viable farmland for generations and that it's not gone. It's sort of like when Jason Page was given his presentation, you got to have a plan in place in event something may happen, and so that you don't get kind of caught after the fact and wishing that you did, and it be physically impossible to come back from that. And I think PLANWake does a great job, and I commend all of you for doing the job you've done of creating this. But I think it's our plan of what we can do now. Let's have this plan now and not wait 10 years when it's just financially unreliable or feasible to purchase these easements because it's just too expensive or what the case may be. And then we're kind of behind the 8 ball. We're just too late to do that. So, but I commend y'all. And as you know, updating the county UDO updates and stuff, y'all have a lot of this part was just probably easy getting it approved. Now y'all have a large workload of now getting it done, right? So there's a lot of stuff that people don't know. Now you've got a huge workload to get this done, but Soil and Water certainly wants to work with y'all with those updates and how we can work together to accomplish all of those things that you've said, Terry. So great job.
Thank you.
And we did have one comment coming in from Evan. He mentions that other counties in the state provide county funds to match state and federal funds for conservation easements. These funds could further incentive landowners to consider conservation easements. I don't know if you'll have any comments to that, but.
No, I don't. Teresa, are you familiar whether or not the county has any funds available?
The only funds that I know that's available, and Lynn could probably jump in as well, because I was trying to get tying it all in together, would be the open space funds that is currently within the Wake County Parks and Recreation Open Space Program. Yeah. Those funds have been used mainly for, like I said, buying up property. It's actually preserving and buying land. I know they have done some easements, but I don't think they've done many easements, more so actually buying land. Lynn could probably help me, but I know Triangle Land Conservancy actually partners with the Wake County Open Space and trying to utilize those county funds along with the state funds, like you were talking about, Evan was talking about, and the federal funds. All those funds, as you know, Wake County land is expensive. We have to have multiple sources of funds to make a project happen. So, but Lynn, I know you're an expert on this. If you want to expand on that any.
Yeah, those funds have been used sometimes for conservation easements, and we've partnered with the county on those projects, but a lot of that funding has already been allocated. So I would just really second that it would be great to have a county resource dedicated specifically to farmland easements. Several of our neighboring counties have that, and it's enabled a lot of farmland protection work and the ability for us to leverage these state and federal resources.
Right. And I think the funds that we typically use are those that are coming from bond referendums and not necessarily dedicated county funds that are set aside as part of the budget.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah. A good question, Evan. So, and one thing we need to work on, and maybe we can do that through this PLANWake as well. Maybe that's something that we can highlight, that there's a needed resource and funds dedicated just for that. Like I said, you know how long and time it takes with budgets to make things happen and get funds set aside. So I think we need to start that planning process now and making sure that we try to get some of that set aside. Because it does, as Leanne showed you the timeline, sometimes with closing these easements, it's not a very short turnaround time to make sure everything's in place and like it should be. So Michaela, do you see anything else?
Yes, there was a comment from Joni in regards to your priorities question, Terry. She said she ditto to what Teresa said earlier, but she mentioned specifically urban sprawl encroaching and negatively impacting farmland and agricultural communities and the lack of realistic buffers between the development and the farmland.
Yeah, I did have a farmer let me know yesterday, that was one of his concerns and was wondering, he said, during your conversations, if you could, maybe there would be a buffer between the two land uses, because a lot of times the houses are built right on the property line. There's not much buffer. In one instances that I went to, I think the new subdivision, you could walk right out the back door and you were in the cornfield right next, so there was no buffer whatsoever between the two. And maybe having that buffer for many reasons. Number one, having a buffer between the land uses, but that also helps treat that stormwater and flowing through that buffer area before it reaches another person's property that could adversely impact that person's property. So looking at those options, I think will be a great, and during that process of maybe updating that UDO as well. So great comment, Joni. I know you would be on here.
She did have one more comment to share. She agreed with the idea of cities and municipalities being required to build up within that existing city limit to take some of the pressure off of farmland.
Right. And that's a good point. And you have to realize that development is coming and people are moving in at a faster rate, and it's going to happen. So how do we still let that happen, but still also preserve those rural areas? So, and that's one good thing I think the PLANWake has put in there, is having that option to be able to, do that, push more development back into the centers of the municipality. So, and keep that pressure off for as long as we can. So, and it could also help us, give us more time in these rural areas to people that may want to do conservation easements or have an interest in preserving those farms, that we could work with and have time to secure funding for those kind of easements and things. So it gives us more time to do that as well, and takes the pressure off. Because I do hear a lot of my farmers, one that the same guy that I saw yesterday said, he got an offer, and the developers called him, almost monthly, write him and say, offering him X amount of money as often as possible. And so they do have those pressures constantly, and it's in the millions, as you know. I know his was in the millions. If you will sell, all you have to do is sign today. Here's 1.5 million, 2 million. And so those pressures do exist on existing landowners in Wake County. So, very good question. So,
yeah, Teresa, if I could just follow up on that, because one of the what we've heard during the process is having farmers saying that they want some flexibility with not too many regulations, because they want the opportunity to be able to sell if there's some family emergencies or some transfer is in the offing, to not to be too regulated. And so we've kind of trying to work with farmers, the farming community, to determine kind of what priorities should we have along those lines as well.
I agree, Sharon, and I've heard those concerns as well. Most of the, as you know, the large landowners that are in forest or in farming agriculture uses, their most assets they have is in their land. You know, it's not financial money or as far as cash, but it's in the land as their inheritance or their money and their life savings, is everything they've got is tied up in that land. And so they do want to have that flexibility and not have those rights taken away in case something does happen. So, and I definitely want to be courteous of that because it is there and it is their choice for that. So, and I think there's room for both. And I've heard from both, and I've heard from some that want to protect it, you know, long term, and then some that just will not be able to tie that up for their, you know, their ancestors as well. So, good point too. It's a good topic. We could talk about this one for hours, I know. So, anything else, Michaela?
I don't see any other questions at this time.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna follow up with of course, all the presentations that you saw today and heard will be posted to our website very soon for anybody to watch. They're going to be posted as YouTube videos. Each presentation will be separate. So that way, if you want to just listen to the PLANWake or listen to the LIN with Triangle Conservancy, you can just click on those and be able to hear those. I want to give a big thank you to the Wake County Board of Commissioners for their support and dedication. 16 years now of the Keeping the Farm Workshop. They do care about us and soil and water, and they care about the farm and rural communities. I know they do. They get out with me and ride around and want to look at the issues that's going on. And without their support, they wouldn't, you know, allow us to do this workshop and to give you the information and keep you educated as we try to do every year on what's going on, what changes are happening, and what we can do to help support you. Of course, also a big sincere thank you to the expert presenters. I will say expert because they're definitely an expert in their resource professions, and their presentations were outstanding today. And they provided you the information you needed for your farm and forest. It would not be possible without them. The collaboration that we have and that we've had a work group with this Keeping the Farm for many years has been just absolutely wonderful to work with. And so they took their time out of their day and made these presentations to help you. And they also make this annual workshop that we have a great success. And so they want to, one thing I can say about all these presenters and Wake County agencies that are helping us with this, tax administration, planning, and the register of deeds are usually right on board with us, is that they do provide excellent customer service to the citizens of Wake County. And so if you have questions, we're here to help you and get those questions answered. I reach out to planning all the time and tax, and they're always quick to get back with me and say, you know, this is what's going on. This is why, explain it to me, and for me to help you, rural landowners and farmers, to understand what's going on in your property and how they can help you with the situation. And I want to thank again for all the participants. I don't know how many we had, but farm and forest landowners that attended this afternoon. You took the time out of your day as well to attend it, and I hope that you learned something from it. You got some resources to help, if not, at least some contacts. At least you know we're here, and that we have contact with all these resource professionals, and we're here to guide you and to assist you with whatever you need in the coming months and years with your farm and forest. We do plan on hosting the 17th annual Keeping the Farm Workshop next spring in person. So that is our goal, and that's what we hope to do. If nothing changes, and we'll host that right here at the Wake County Office Park like we have in the past. So if we don't have any further comments or questions from the presenters or anyone in the audience that's watching, I wish everyone to have a wonderful and safe afternoon. So just let me know, Michaela.
I do not see any more questions, just a bunch of comments saying thank you for the information. A lot of comments saying that they love the workshop. So getting a lot of thumbs up. Yeah, and that's why it was important for us to do that this year. I mean, it is not ideal. I understand that, because you can't take away the face-to-face, the personal connections, the breakout sessions that we have in the afternoon, that you can actually talk to someone, you know, face-to-face inside, you know, personally. With something that you may be dealing with, but we're still here to do that. Like I said, just email us or call us. We can still provide that, and we hope to get back next year to do that. And of course, we all missed the wonderful lunch that was always provided, and the breakfast as well. So
those are things we hope to get back with as well next year. But we knew how important it was to the landowners here in Wake County. I've heard this from all the surveys that I've gotten over the years, and we didn't want to skip a year. And so that's why we kind of improvised and, got our presenters together, and so glad that they were willing to do this. And we look forward to doing it again next year as well. So thank you all. And thank you all for the wonderful comments.